had been with Gavin for 8 years. But 3 days before our wedding, I found thousands of photos of the same woman on his computer. I secretly booked a flight to leave the country on our wedding day, silently watching his nonchalant act. On the day of our wedding, the bride ran away and he went crazy. "Mr. Lee, is that overseas position still available? I've made up my mind. I want to go." My supervisor sounded relieved when he heard that I agreed to go overseas for training. "Okay, I'll submit your information right away. But I heard you were getting married." "It's fine, the wedding is off. Don't worry." My voice trembled slightly. I hung up the phone immediately to prevent him from noticing. I stared at the thousands of photos of that woman on Gavin's computer, a little dazed. After we graduated, we had joined the same company. Although we worked in different departments, I still saw him often. He was at his bachelor party tonight. His phone was turned off. Our supervisor couldn't reach him and needed the plan urgently, which was why he called me. That's when I first opened his computer and found those photos. In an instant, memories of the past 8 years flooded my mind. In all our time together, there had never been a picture of me on his phone. There were no records of our relationship at all. No matter how much I cried or how much I argued, he always said that we saw each other every day, so there was no need for mementos. It was only now that I realized that it wasn't that there was no need, but rather that I wasn't necessary to him. For 8 years, I had come up with excuses for his indifference. My stubbornness was a joke. The words that his friend had said when we had announced our wedding rang in my ears. "Well, I thought you were going to be alone forever because of Mandy. Are you really going to get married? Aren't you doing this out of spite?" Back then, I didn't notice the panic in his eyes and patted my chest with confidence. "We are doing this for love." Now I understood the reason for that question, and I didn't have the courage to repeat those words. I took a few deep breaths and closed the computer. I opened my phone to tell Gavin that I wanted to break up, but I saw that he hadn't even replied to the message I sent a day ago when I had chosen my wedding dress. I checked his social media. The background was completely black, and there were no posts. There was only one empty word under his profile picture. "Wait." I smiled bitterly and collapsed on the sofa. I didn't know that there was another woman in his heart. I had thought that he was just introverted. Now I realized how naive I had been. I had asked him many times about his social media profile, but he had never answered. Today I finally knew. There were 3 days left until our simple wedding. I set the countdown as my phone's dynamic wallpaper to remind myself every day. Watching the seconds tick by, I rubbed my sore eyes, trying to suppress my exhaustion. Just as I was about to book my flight, Gavin's friend called. "Jara, Gavin is drunk. Can you come get him? I'll send you the address." In the receiver, I could faintly hear Gavin calling out, "Mandy." My heart was in my throat. The caller quickly hung up. I shook my head, trying to get rid of these unwanted emotions, and changed my clothes. As I walked to the entrance, I noticed the matching keychains that I had carefully picked out. The half that belonged to Gavin had been thrown onto the cabinet. I had commissioned a custom design for those keychains, but he had said that it was too childish and had never worn it. I grabbed the keychains and threw them in the trash. Then I noticed the matching mugs that he hadn't even unwrapped under the coffee table. It was like my solo play was being mocked. A feeling of helplessness washed over me. I grabbed the trash can and threw all of the couple items into the trash. After throwing away the garbage, I took a cab to the address that his friend had sent me. When I got to the door of the room, I could hear giggling questions. "Mandy, why are you back today? You wouldn't have heard that Gavin is getting married and regretted your decision, would you?" I took a deep breath, put on a smile, and pushed the door open. The laughter stopped, and the others looked awkward. The man that I was supposed to marry in 3 days was in another woman's arms, looking at her with adoring eyes. That woman was the same woman whose face I had seen countless times on his computer. Gavin's friends were surprised to see me so quickly, and they pulled him away from Mandy. However, Gavin seemed to have drunk too much and he didn't move. He was shouting, "Get away from me! Don't touch me!" This was the first time I had ever seen him so drunk. His friend leaned into his ear. "Jara is here to pick you up. Wake up. You are getting married soon." The others rushed forward to help, and after a lot of effort, They were able to separate Gavin from Mandy. He fell back onto the sofa. His face was flushed. His friend sighed in relief and then introduced me. This is Mandy, our high school classmate. She went abroad in her second year of college. She's just come back, so we had a get-together. Gavin drank too much. Don't think too much of it. In the past, I might have lost control and asked why they had let Mandy come, knowing that Gavin and I were getting married. But now I just smiled indifferently. Mandy looked at me with a curious expression. Finally, Gavin's friend started to introduce my identity. When he said the word fiancé, Gavin, who had been silent on the sofa for a long time, angrily said, "She's just a friend." My hand under my sleeve clenched tightly. My palm was hurting from my fingernails and I was trembling. Everyone changed their expressions. They looked at me with awkward pity. This wasn't the first time that Gavin refused to acknowledge my identity. Long ago, when he refused to post on social media, refused to appear with me at the company, and refused to invite family and friends to our wedding, I had already guessed what our ending would be. But I didn't want to give up hope on those 8 years and the potential for love. But I had lost. I forced myself to smile and nodded at Mandy. "Hello, I'm Gavin's friend, Jara. You look even more beautiful than you do in pictures." After I said those words, the room fell silent. The others looked at each other. Mandy smiled as if it was nothing, and reached out for the fruit plate. But Gavin, who had just slumped back down, suddenly sat up straight. "Mandy, you're allergic to mangoes. You can't eat those." Mandy stopped and looked at him, amused. She said softly, "You're still the same as you were 10 years ago, silly. It's watermelon. You're drunk." Something seemed to explode in my mind at that moment. The shrapnel tore my heart apart. He hadn't forgotten. He just hadn't cared about me. For 8 years, I had reminded him countless times that I was allergic to seafood, but he always chose to take me to seafood restaurants. I went from being angry to resigned, and then I started to lie to myself. He was just too tired from work, and his mind couldn't hold other things. Today, reality had woken me up once more. Every detail was revealing the fact that he didn't love me. I helped him up from the sofa without emotion. As we were heading out for a cab, Mandy followed us out. She smiled at Gavin's face. Then she carefully said, "Gavin can't hold his liquor and he's allergic to the ingredients in hangover medicine. When you get home, you need to make him a cup of honey water. The water should be below 140 degrees. He'll be fine soon. If not, his head will ache in the morning." Gavin had never told me any of this. I bit my lip and turned to get into the car. She stopped me once more. "Oh yes, why don't I add you on social media? If he feels uncomfortable, you can ask me." Gavin never sleeps soundly after drinking. You have to keep an eye on him. He always kicks off his covers, so you have to cover him up. Otherwise, he will definitely get a fever. My nails were digging into my flesh. My eyelashes trembled. I looked at her innocent eyes for a long time and finally nodded. We added each other, and I saw that her social media background was a photo of her with Gavin. In the photo, the two of them looked young, their eyes full of confidence and their fingers interlocked. As the car door closed, tears streamed down my face silently. I had always heard about the power of the one who got away, but I had never really believed it. I had always thought that sincerity would be reciprocated, but now I had begun to doubt my beliefs. On the way home, Gavin's phone vibrated many times. Mandy was messaging him to see if he had gotten home safely. I unlocked the screen and wanted to reply out of courtesy, but then I saw a message between him and his friends. "This wedding is my last chance. If she still doesn't come back, I will give up. Post the news about my wedding in our class group. Don't tell the others anything else." My fingers stopped moving. I quickly turned off my phone, but my breathing was still fast. It felt like no matter how hard I tried to breathe, oxygen couldn't get into my chest. Tears were streaming down my face more and more. No wonder he had suddenly proposed to me 3 days ago. There had been no ring, no wedding home, and no dowry. All he said was, "Don't tell our families." I had thought that he was feeling guilty about not giving me a proper wedding. I had thought that my effort had finally moved him, but I realized that the wedding I had been expecting for 8 years was just a way for him to pressure Mandy to come back. My heart's last remaining affection for him had been used up. I could only try to comfort myself. Since I had decided to leave, everything about them had nothing to do with me anymore. When we got home, Gavin was a little bit more sober. He went directly to the bathroom to wash up. I made the honey water according to what Mandy had said. I wanted to have no regrets about this relationship. I had just sat down on the sofa when my supervisor called. He was telling me about the handoff of my work before I left. As soon as I hung up, Gavin's voice rang out in anger. Leaving? Where are you going? He was drying his wet hair and was looking at me with no expression. I gave him the honey water. It's nothing. I'm just going on a business trip. He was too lazy to think too much, or perhaps he just didn't care. He took the cup and bent his head to drink, but he noticed the honey. His eyebrows furrowed. He angrily questioned me. Where did you learn that? Don't waste your time reading things online. Things on the internet aren't always right for everyone. He slammed the cup on the table and turned around and went to the bedroom. I couldn't help but smile. It seemed that I was not able to follow the methods of white moonlight. The next day was supposed to be the day for us to take our wedding photos. When Gavin woke up, he acted like nothing had happened. He was still indifferent. After seeing his tender gaze for Mandy, I no longer believed that he was simply a cold person. After breakfast, he looked at his phone. Then he suddenly said, "Let's not take our wedding photos in the park, let's do it at the school." I saw that it's popular to do that online now. My hands, as I was cleaning up the dishes, paused. Okay, whatever you want. I knew why he had changed his mind. Because Mandy had posted on social media about how she missed her old school. I didn't want to expose his lies, but I also didn't want to feel embarrassed when our relationship was about to end. I wanted to keep things civil for the 1.5 days I had left. Before we left, I knew what was going to happen. So I intentionally chose a wedding dress that was easy to walk in. The photographer brought us to the playground. Gavin looked around for a long time, and finally saw a familiar figure under the shade of a tree. Without saying anything to me, he immediately turned around to go find Mandy. I smiled awkwardly at the confused photographer. Sorry for wasting your time. We'll pay you anyway. Even though I had chosen a wedding dress that was easy to walk in, it was still hard for me to walk on the playground in high heels. After a lot of effort, I finally got to Gavin's side. He was smiling and talking to Mandy. He had thrown his coat onto the ground. When he saw me, his eyebrows furrowed. It was as if he was worried that I was going to say something and expose our relationship in front of Mandy. He hurriedly said, "What are you doing here?" "I'm just talking to my classmate." My face froze and I forced myself to smile. There's something I have to take care of at the company. I didn't bring my phone with me because I'm wearing this wedding dress. I just had to come tell you. His eyes widened in surprise. In the past, I would have lost control, but this time I didn't say anything. I didn't want to get in his way. His face softened. He nodded without saying anything. I turned around and left, almost stumbling. The voices around me started to fade away. Don't think too much about it. It was an advertisement for the wedding shop. They forced me to take the photos with her. I wasn't lying. After I went back, I was busy the whole day at the company. When I got home that night, he had unexpectedly prepared a meal for me. When he saw me come in, he immediately turned off his phone. He looked a little uncomfortable. "You're back, why were you so late?" "I made dinner. I noticed that you looked a little thinner in the wedding dress this morning." My footsteps stopped for a moment. Thinner. It seemed that since I had seen those photos, I hadn't been able to eat. When I saw all of the greasy food on the table, I frowned. "You can eat, I'm not hungry. I'm going to rest." When I turned around, the abrasion on my ankle from the high heels was exposed. I had just gone into the bedroom when he walked in with a first aid kit. In my memory, this was the first time he had ever shown any concern for me. But the wound had already scabbed, and I no longer needed him. I politely refused, and Gavin's face darkened. He went back out and brought a cake to my bedside. "I'm sorry. I didn't know that she would go to the school. She is a longtime classmate, so I couldn't just ignore her. You have to trust me. From the moment I decided to marry you, I didn't have her in my heart anymore. I'm just taking care of her because she's a friend. Now that she's back, I want to have closure with my past." Before he could finish, I glanced at the cake and interrupted him. I've given up sugar for a long time, and I've only been eating boiled vegetables. You've forgotten. To be at my best for the wedding, I had been living like a monk for a week, but he didn't care. This was the first time I had rejected him after his apology. Gavin finally lost his patience, and his face became cold again. This time he left the room and didn't come back. At midnight I heard my stomach rumbling. When I got up to get water, I saw a faint light coming from his phone in the living room. The light was illuminating Gavin's face. His fingers were moving fast over the keyboard and he was smiling. I remembered when he had said that he didn't stay up late, and that's why he refused to stay up with me for New Year's. My heart turned cold once more. I didn't get any water. I went back to my room. The next day was supposed to be the day we got our marriage license. When I walked out of my room, he was already gone. There was no explanation and no messages. I habitually opened Mandy's social media and saw that she had posted a photo of her getting in for. When you are with me, I feel like I have the entire world. I'm not scared of anything. Tears welled up in my eyes. I smiled coldly, and my hands trembled as I started to type. I made a mistake and deleted it, and then typed again. Finally, I posted a message in the comments section. You win. Your world is yours. I deleted her contact, marking the end of that relationship. The moment I turned off my phone, I collapsed on the sofa. The next day, the alarm rang and I went to work with swollen eyes. I was so busy with the overseas branch that I didn't have time to think about him. Letting go of that failed relationship was easier than I thought. My phone didn't receive any more calls from home. I thought we were done, but as I was leaving work, I saw a familiar figure waiting outside the office building. Gavin was standing with his back to the building. He was impatiently holding his phone. Her illness is getting worse and she has an infection? Go. Find a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I have something to take care of. It's more convenient for others to take care of her. Okay, don't call me right now. I glanced at him and kept walking, making sure to avoid him. But I had only taken 2 steps when I heard fast footsteps behind me. Before I could run, Gavin had grabbed my wrist. Why didn't you tell me you were going overseas? Is it because I took Mandy to the hospital? I explained it to you. Why are you being difficult? Why did you take all of the things from our home? That was supposed to be our home. Don't I have the right to know? I thought that I was strong enough. But as soon as I saw him again, as soon as I heard his words, tears started to flow. I forced myself to break free from his grasp and turned to look at him. Tell you? Why would I tell you? What do you want me to say? Should I tell you that I saw the thousands of pictures of Mandy on your computer? Or that you used our wedding as a bargaining chip to force Mandy to come back? His face, which had been pale from the all-night flight, was now gaunt. His eyes were bloodshot. If this were in the past, I would have gone home with him and given up this chance to go overseas. But as I looked at his helpless eyes, I didn't feel any pity or sympathy for him. His face went stiff when he realized that I had seen his computer. His first reaction was to question me. You looked at my computer? Didn't I say that those were all work documents? Who said you could look at it? Don't I have any privacy? He realized that he was getting emotional and took a deep breath. But before he could explain, I started to laugh. You were busy partying at your bachelor party and crying. With Mandy in your arms. Your supervisor couldn't reach you and they needed the documents. That's why they called me. Do you think I wanted to see it? It disgusted me. This was the first time that I had given him the cold shoulder. He acted like I was just acting out of jealousy. He softened his tone. He looked like he was trying to appease me. I can explain what was in my computer. I had just forgotten to delete them. They were there from a long time ago. About the wedding, I was dumped by her. I was just saying that in front of my friends to save face. I didn't think that you would misunderstand. Please believe me. From the moment I decided to marry you, I didn't have any feelings for her. Taking care of her was just an act of friendship. Since she's back, I wanted closure with my past. The excuses he was making sounded like a way for him to justify his actions. My smile was colder. Is that so? Gavin, are you saying that you dated me for 8 years while you hadn't resolved your feelings for your ex? What am I to you? Just a tool to clean up the memories of your past. From the countless times you chose her over me, I don't need any explanation. Your actions are the best answer. Are you not embarrassed when you say these words? You didn't worry that I would be hurt, or disappointed, or that I would leave. Why are you here now? Do you want to hear me break up with you in person? His face grew paler with each of my questions. He opened his mouth, but he couldn't say a word. As I was about to leave, he said slowly, I can delete the things on my computer right now. I did waver in the beginning, but when I found out that you hadn't gone to the wedding, I knew what my heart wanted. I'm here to make amends. Can you give me one more chance? I didn't turn around and I didn't say anything. I walked away without hesitation. This time he didn't stop me. Could I give this relationship another chance? After Mandy had appeared, I had asked myself that question many times. I had also given him countless chances, but the results were clear. I didn't want to do that again. When I got back to my apartment after washing up, there was knocking at the door. I opened it and was met with a huge insulated lunchbox. Gavin's smiling face popped out from the side. I heard that the food overseas isn't very good. I made this just for you. Try it while it's hot. This was the first time that he had ever smiled so brightly at me, and it was the first time that he had ever cooked for me. I was momentarily disoriented. I closed the door right away. He wasn't angry. He was patiently knocking at the door. I leaned against the door, helpless. Why did he choose to love me after we were apart? I no longer needed him. He knocked for 30 minutes and I sat on the ground for 30 minutes. Then the doorbell rang. The hospital seemed to have called again. He ran out of patience and started to shout, Didn't I tell you she should go to the doctor? The car accident wasn't my fault. My wedding was ruined. I have something important to take care of. The person on the other end talked for a long time. Then I heard footsteps and the door was silent. I got up and opened the door. There was only the insulated lunchbox on the floor. I guess it meant that even when I ran away I couldn't win against her. But I didn't want to win anymore. I threw the lunchbox into the garbage and ordered takeout. I thought that when Gavin got the call, he would buy a ticket home, but the next day, he was waiting at the door. He was holding a bouquet of flowers. I glanced at him, acting like I didn't see him, and walked away. He followed me. Let me take you to work. I heard that there is a lot of crime overseas. I don't want you to be alone. When I heard those words, I stopped. Gavin, do you think it's fun to act like you're a deeply loving person? When I was in China, I waited alone for taxis late at night countless times. You refused to come get me. What did you say? Have you forgotten? You said that other girls also go through it. Does being single mean that you don't deserve to live? If you're scared, you can hire a bodyguard. You have other things to do. His pupils trembled at my words. I continued. Now I also have things that I need to do. Please leave and don't bother me again. I walked to the road and called a taxi. As soon as I opened the door, he got into the car as well. I know that I wasn't a good boyfriend before. Can you give me a chance to make amends? I don't want us to be separated by a misunderstanding. I didn't want to waste my time with him, so I closed my eyes to sleep. On the way, his phone kept ringing. I yelled in anger. Can you take care of your own things? Stop showing up in front of me. We've already broken up. Why are you still doing this? Your beloved one is in China, not here. With that, we arrived at the office building. I immediately got out and closed the door. I didn't give him another minute. When I got to the elevator, I pulled out my phone and called Gavin's team leader. Why is Gavin still on leave when he's not getting married? Is there no work for him to do at the company? Can't you make him go back to China? After a long pause, his team leader explained, Gavin is taking his annual leave. I can't do anything. I hung up the phone in annoyance. For the next week, he haunted me. I had to say, habits were terrifying things. I went from being angry to indifferent in just a few days. On the 7th night, my landlord called and told me that the neighbors were complaining about the noise that Gavin was making. He had been seen outside my door. The landlord asked me if he was my friend. I was confused. The landlord told me that Gavin had set up a tent outside the building. He had been there all night with the lights on. Every time someone entered, he would rush over and ask for their door number to confirm that they were residents. Many people had already moved out because of this. I rushed to the balcony. I could see the tent and the bright lights below. I got his number from my blacklist and asked what he was doing. He replied, "I'm worried about you, you're alone. I came temporarily, and I haven't found a place to live in this building, so I'm just living downstairs. Oh yes, I have some good news. I already applied to the company and got an overseas training opportunity in our department." His excitement was clear, like I was when we were in love, but I didn't feel any emotion. I just said that I knew and hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. At midnight it started to pour. It was like someone had ripped out a piece of my heart. I went to the balcony, but in the dark I couldn't see him. I got back in bed and covered my ears, trying to force myself to sleep. The next day the rain had stopped, but the sky was dark like the end of the world. The place where he usually waited for me was empty. I paused for a moment and suppressed my disappointment and took a cab to work. It was rare for me not to receive any calls from him that day. When I was leaving work, it started to rain again. I waited an hour before I was able to get a cab, but then the rain affected my vision. When the driver went through an intersection, he couldn't see the lights, and a car crashed into the side of our car. The impact was so strong, and I felt like my organs were being crushed. In that moment I felt like I was about to die. I tried to make a sound, but I didn't hear anyone respond. The driver was already dying. The rain was washing away the broken glass. My calls for help were drowned by the storm. The blood was flowing from my wounds. My body temperature dropped rapidly. As my mind started to fade, the only person that I thought about was Gavin. Luckily, my phone was inside my clothes. With my last bit of strength, I pressed the emergency contact button. The phone automatically called Gavin's number. It rang 3 times, but he didn't answer. Tears mixed with the rain. I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I had been taken to a hospital. Gavin was by my side. He was pale and hadn't shaved. He looked pathetic. I closed my eyes, refusing to look at him. He started to panic and said with a trembling voice, "I'm sorry. I didn't know you had called. My phone ran out of battery. I just flew here from China. Mandy, she has a critical illness. She said that she wanted to see me one last time." What does that have to do with me? We've broken up. You can go see whoever you want. I had once again let myself be hurt. I had needed this lesson to finally understand that I didn't have a place in his heart. My broken ribs were hurting so much that sweat started to drip down my forehead. He reached out to help wipe it away. But I said coldly, "Leave. We are done. Don't show up in front of me again. Go find Mandy." Gavin finally understood that he was about to lose me forever. I already went back. I didn't think that she would trick me. I will never trust her again. I've already made it clear with her. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. Is that important? My voice was completely emotionless. I looked at him as if he were a stranger. His emotions started to crack. He wanted to explain, but he couldn't say anything. "Please trust me one time, Jara." I frowned and with great pain said, "Gavin, we are done. Completely, forever. Don't make me hate you." His pupils shook and his hands froze. He looked at my hate-filled eyes, and he finally didn't say anything. After a few minutes, he finally gave up. He turned around and left the room. He seemed to disappear from my life. Except that every day lunch was delivered to my room. When I was discharged, I returned to the company. I passed his department and he was buried in his work. We became the most familiar strangers at the company. We even had to communicate through emails for a whole year. He thought that he had hidden it well, but I could still feel his eyes on me during meetings. With time, his gaze had grown warmer and more intense. Then, a large bouquet of roses was delivered to my desk. He rushed to me, his eyes wide with anger. I looked at him. His actions were exactly like mine from a few years ago. But I simply said, "Yes, I'm in a relationship. I'll send you an invitation to our wedding." He was the person who saved me during that storm. After he heard that, he left like he was lost. The next day, the company announced that he had completed training and gone back to China. This was the best ending. That day, my boyfriend and I chose the date for our wedding. This time I was going to be a happy bride.